Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Expert Talks. My name is Will Tyndall, and I'll be your guide today as we join Monica Manuel in a discussion on what she's learned in her career, the importance of finding your why, and how to take action once you've determined what that actually is. Before we begin, I'll share a little background on Shift, myself, Expert Talks, and on our guest, Monica. As many of you know, Shift is a career change and talent development platform that uses the DoD Skill Bridge to offer internships to transitioning service members. We also offer those career services to help service members discover what could be in their next career. Recently, we've also launched our veteran program, which allows for veterans at any stage in their career to participate in our career services and for us to help them find that next big step. In addition to that, we have a partnership with the Air Force with our AF Ventures program, which allows for active duty airmen and anyone in the Department of the Air Force to do internships at venture and investment companies and take that knowledge back to the active duty Air Force so they can use and learn and grow in their venture capital branch. For those of you whom I haven't met, my name is Will Tyndall. I'm a former Marine, a former Shift Fellow, and I'm currently a candidate support manager on the Shift candidate support team. Our team, we provide support to any service member or veteran that's trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. Our job is to help guide them and kind of be that Sherpa for them. And something our team's always wanted to do was provide the best resources possible for these transitioning veterans and for these service members. It kind of dawned on us, what better way to get someone resources or knowledge as far as what could be or how you can have a great career than to ask somebody who's an expert that's done it, that's been down that path, that knows what it is that it takes to be successful. So that led us to create Expert Talks, where every week we're joined by experts who share their insights, their learnings, and their experience with you to help you discover what could be and how to get there. Lastly, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on Crowdcast. We want this to be as interactive as possible today, so please use the chat on the right-hand side or the ask a question function down at the bottom. Any questions that you have, Monica will be able to answer them. If not, I'll be here as well to kind of add some color on things. But she truly is a wizard when it comes to all things sales and operations. Without further ado, I'd love to give you a brief introduction of Monica. Monica is currently the Vice President of Operations at a company called GoHealth. She began her career at 17 years old in sales and quickly learned what it takes to really advance your career and grow and lead and inspire people. That led her to where she is today, but along the way, she's held roles as a director, as a head of sales. She's mastered what it takes to actually drive a team to be successful. There's actually something really cool that she just did with the current pandemic, where she mobilized a workforce of over 1,600 people to go from working in an office to going remote, which is something that not a lot of companies can do, but we'll get into that a little later. But she joined GoHealth in 2018 to lead the expansion of their sales centers. She's been crushing it ever since. And Monica, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here, man. I should have you talk to me about me every day. I've now.
Oh, well, I mean, it's all things that you've done, so you should be proud. I'm proud to even have said it, and I'm very thankful that you're here today to share your knowledge. Honestly, though, I feel like I really didn't do any justice with that introduction. If you could, share a little bit more about who you are and your journey.
Sure. I think probably all that would be useful to know about my journey is that it should hopefully give people a lot of hope. It's not very traditional. You mentioned it started at 17. That's because I was working the bar rush at the diner. I had graduated high school a year early and was going to the University of Utah and was working from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. serving tables, waiting tables at the diner. And that's hard. That's a friend of mine saw an ad in a newspaper for a phone sales job, and it paid $12 an hour plus commissions. And I was like, well, that sounds better than what I'm doing. So I went and tried it and took to it and did really well. That wasn't tons of fun either, but I liked having some control over what I was making. And what really fascinated me was learning how to help people make a decision and act on it, call people out on their excuses and have them find a reason to take action, even in that little form, selling, kids safety videos and teasers and silly stuff like that. But I left there, and the boss I had there went to, I'm going to date myself here, PageNet, and he recruited me over to sell pagers in bulk to companies. And so I got a side of the business to business sales. And so, yeah, early 90s, this is a long time ago. But then moved to California and sold for Xerox, and learned that, they have an incredible sales training at Xerox. And so learned that side of the business. And then when I came back to Utah, just continued to develop in like every level of sales, and became a sales trainer and a sales manager, and ultimately ended up running sales and learning the operations behind it. And the reason I said all that is because I don't have any fancy degrees. Like, I didn't know anyone. I just kind of like started at the bottom and learned how people work and how businesses work, and kind of worked my way up. And now being the VP of operations is a little different than sales. What made me able to bridge that gap, though, was oftentimes you'll see sales and marketing or sales and operations kind of butt heads and struggle in organizations. But having come up through sales and understanding, kind of what drives revenue in a company, but then also understanding what drives profitability, I was able to bridge that gap. And I think it helps from having that background to be able to then, lead the operations of things and make things happen from a logistical cross-functional perspective.
Mm-hmm. That is fantastic, because cross functionality is something that not a lot of companies can master, and the fact that you were able to take your experience and build on it, and have those lessons learned. And today, I really kind of want to dig into what those lessons were. I'll start out with maybe the hardest question that I have for you, but what do you think is the most important lesson that you learned from that entire journey, as far as communicating, whether it be with the customer or with your team?
It's a really good question. So here's probably in a nutshell the lesson. I'll explain it, but people decide things for their reasons, not yours. And you do things for your reasons, not theirs. And if you aren't aware of what your reasons are, and you aren't controlling for your own need, you're going to mess up any attempt at communicating effectively or facilitating someone else's decision, because you'll be all wrapped up in your own need. And that's not the arena where the decision's being made, unless you're the one making the decision. So being aware of what that person needs, what they're there for, what they're looking for, and being able to help understand and navigate through and say things that are relevant to that, ask questions that are relevant to that, you're just not even playing on the right field. And so if it's a negotiation, if it's a sale, if it's, a relationship you're just trying to communicate with, and you aren't understanding the needs that have brought the other person to the conversation, you're missing it. Mm-hmm. That applies across pretty much anything you do with another human being. So that's probably the most important, and I can get into some of how that applies, but that's what I would say is the most important lesson.
Gotcha. And we're definitely going to get into that, so don't worry. But I know when we had spoke previously, one of the big things that we've really harped in on, and something that kind of ties in perfectly with this, is just knowing what the customer wants. Why do they want that? What is it that you're actually trying to solve for? And I think knowing someone's why, whether it be your own or the customer's, is important. But what is the true importance of knowing somebody's why? Why is that so important to be able to facilitate that kind of relationship or make those sales, whatever it is you're doing?
So it is still important to understand just, where is somebody, where do they want to go, and what's in their way, what has to happen to get them to where they want to go. And that's a big part of why. So that's like the structure of why, or the logical part of why. For example, if I'm here and I want to go there, and I need to obtain, do X, Y, and Z to get there, then we've established, where I want to go and what I need to do to get there. But if you think about it this way, if I was on this side of the Grand Canyon and I wanted to go to that side of the Grand Canyon, and there was an I-beam bridging across, that is capable of holding my weight. It can transport me across, I can walk across it and get to the other side. And if there was a pile of $1 million sitting on the other side, and all I had to do was walk across that I-beam to get it, I wouldn't do it. I would be sure I would get vertigo, fall off, and die. Like, I'm scared of heights. I wouldn't do it. But if, say, my son was on the other side and was in some way in danger or something, it wouldn't even be a decision. I'd be across that thing without even thinking about it, because I had a reason to go that was greater than my fear of dying, of going, of falling. And I'd probably be across it and then look back and go, what was I doing? Once the situation had passed. So that's what I'm getting at is you can ask the right questions to find out, which is the start. Where are you? Where do you want to go? What do you need to do to get there? But if you miss that piece of why will they actually do the hard work of change? Because any change, even if it's for your own reasons, for things you want, is hard. And if you don't understand what that is for them, you aren't going to overcome the fear of action and get them to take a step and commit their way to that I-beam.
And that ties in perfectly with what one of the great quotes that I learned from you, which is nothing overcomes fear like action and nothing festers fear like inaction. So if you don't have that why, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to have the reason or the purpose. And something else that we had talked about was sometimes your why isn't going to be that grand. It's not going to be something that, it's a showstopper by any means. Or there's not going to be a big neon sign that says, this is your why. If you're looking for a sign, this is it. That's not always the case. Sometimes your why is to keep moving forward. And moving forward is something that is part of a why. And how I guess my question would be, if you know that you need to move forward, but maybe you don't have the strongest why is it important to know, like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is where my mindset is, how do I keep moving forward? How do you find purpose if maybe the purpose isn't clear?
Great question. So usually people are a lot more clear about what they don't want than what they want. So sometimes it's just an easier place to start. What do I know I don't want? And I think it's really important. One, I alluded to it in that last answer, but if you can state a problem, if you can articulate what is the problem, well, you're halfway to solving it. And sometimes just taking an honest look at what is the situation? Where am I? What do I not like about it? What would I like to change about it? Even if I don't know ultimately where I want to go, I at least know something about my current situation I don't like. And that might be a lead, but nothing overcomes fear like just taking a step. And then it's kind of like making your bed in the morning, right? At least you've done something and you've gotten a start. Like sometimes it's just get up, move. And so that why, to answer your question, if you're not sure what it is, sometimes it's just better to start with, well, I know I don't like this, so I'm going to try. And oftentimes what stops people from taking action is a fear of failure. But I think it's so important to recognize that no growth, no change, no evolution, no success is going to happen. No learning is going to happen without failure. It's really important. And so like self-compassion gets a squishy reputation, but actually I don't think you can have true resilience and kick any kind of butt without some self-compassion, because that allows you to create room to make mistakes, to take a look at something that happened. And there's this thing in psychology, it's called explanatory style. And if the way you explain we all make meaning out of everything that happens. If the way you explain what happened was to go, oh, there I go again, I suck, this is always going to be like this, how likely are you to get up and go again? Versus, oh, I'll get the next one, must have just been a bad day, or hey, look what I learned from that, I can take that and apply it to the next one. Now you're resilient, now you're learning, now you're getting up and going again. That's courage. So having some self-compassion to go, it's okay to make a mistake. And by the way, having some compassion for others. And if you're leading anyone, creating space for people to make mistakes and learn from them, so long as they're owned, so long as they're learned from. Mistakes are important. So I don't know, did that answer the question?
It did, and that's a beautiful answer for it, because when people say something like failure is not an option, that's just ignorant, because failure is an option. You're either going to fail or you're not. So it's a 50-50. And if someone says you don't have room to fail, well, that means you really don't have room to grow, and you don't have room to see where you can improve. And I think, like you're saying, it's important to fail sometimes, as long as you learn from those failures, as long as you say, okay, here's what I did, I know I messed up, here's how I messed up, here's how I overcome it. And like you're saying, having that resilience and having that tenacity to say, I want more, I want to learn, I want to be better. And that ties into what you're saying with the emotional side of things, and being able to recognize where you are and where other people are. Because if you're working on a team and someone on your team says, oh, I messed up this, if you just start berating them and you say, you did a terrible job, how dare you, and you don't know what's going on in their life, not only are you making an extremely toxic work environment, but you're also not giving that person to grow, and you're going to stunt that person, and you're going to stop the team from progressing as a whole.
That's right. And usually when people say failure is not an option, what I take them to mean is like ultimate failure, right? Like, so, because that ultimate failure, that doesn't happen until you quit. When you quit, then okay. And sometimes it's appropriate to quit a thing, change course, what have you. But there's that balanced effort of, am I just giving up, or have I made a calculated decision that I need to change course? But failures in the sense of making mistakes and trial and error along the way are absolutely necessary. And like on our teams, we say making mistakes is important. You're going to make them. Here's the rules though. You need to be the first or the quickest to go, hey, I made a mistake. I've got a plan to fix it. Or I don't know how to fix that. I need help. Everybody's fine with that. What isn't fine is when you make a mistake and you hide it, or you pretend it didn't happen, or you deny it, because then what growth can happen? And you mentioned emotions a little bit. It's that ability to state a problem well is half the effort or half the battle of solving it. Same thing with our emotions. Just acknowledging, if you can state the emotions you're experiencing well, you're halfway to like navigating them. Because to just pretend we don't have them or stuff them down or separate from them, like, come on. None of us human beings effectively do that without consequences. While rather than be mastered by them, you can be aware of them and just go, hey, I'm feeling this way. I understand it's temporary, but you just take a note of it. And here's the thing: when the pressure's on, when the heat and the fire gets turned up, and I like analogies, you'll pick that up. But think about like when they take a crucible and they put like a precious metal like gold in it, and they turn up, the refiner will turn up the heat to melt that metal. Well, what happens under that fire is the dross, or the impurities in the metal, will rise to the top, and then they'll scrape that off and they'll be left with a more pure product. Same thing happens with us when we go through like trials or pressure. It gets heated up and like stuff comes up, right? And here's the pivot point though. If you see that and you go, oh, I suck. If you see that and you go, oh, I'm that thing. No, you're not. That thing got brought up and you can look at it and go, what does this tell me? What adjustment can I make from here? And you're left stronger. It's like a really difficult run where you get your butt kicked and you're exhausted. And you think, why did I do this? But if you have that mentality, like, I just got stronger, the next run's going to be better because my capacity just increased. It's all about your mental approach and how you respond to the pressure, and what meaning you make out of it, what story you tell yourself about it. So the more you can be aware of it and choose your response in that way, the more you can master it, learn from it, and take on new and more challenging adventures.
That makes no, that's perfect, because choosing the right emotional response, being able to kind of correlate your actions with what you're thinking, with your emotions, and be able to say exactly what you're saying, where, how do I do this? How do I move forward? This is what I'm going to do, and being confident in it. I know confidence is something that at Go Health, and for you, it's paramount for your team to be successful, where if you're confident and you're able to say, this is something I can do, or how can I do this, rather than, I can't do that, it's not for me. So my question to you would be, how do you see confidence as a skill that's positive, and not something where someone's cocky or being malicious in any way, but someone who is just truly confident in themselves and they understand the emotional side of things?
And confidence is king. It's paramount. It's so important. But here's what I mean by that. So confidence is either going to come from just like your confidence that a hypothesis is right. So that's kind of like external. I believe this is going to happen. And then there's confidence that comes from having a plan. And when you can have a plan, you can go in knowing what you're going to do first, second, and third, because you can see it. And there's a lot of intentionality, and none of us actually does anything until we've first seen it in our minds. Think about it. A toy in a store. You don't buy a toy in a store without having seen in your mind somebody playing with it, you or someone else you're buying it for. We don't do anything without seeing it first. And so if you can, so for example, I can't tell you how often when the pressure's on, the stakes are high, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I want to get out of bed. I think that it's terrifying sometimes, the amount of responsibility or things that are at stake. You can take a deep breath and remember your training. That's why, practice and discipline and consistency, the magic doesn't happen on game day. It happens in all the thousands of repetitions that happened leading up to that. So if you can trust your process, trust your training, see how do I want the day to go? What am I going to do first, second, third? What are some contingencies? And take those precious resources we have that are the minutes of the day, our emotional bandwidth, our mental space, and allocate them intelligently. What I mean by that is anything you have zero control over doesn't deserve your resources. So when you're spending a lot of time and energy and mental space ruminating or thinking about something you have no control over, it's just a misallocation of resources. You're wasting energy. Bring it back to, what do I know? What can I do? And on our team, I know we talked about this the other day. Well, we don't waste time asking the question, can we? We just assume we can, and we start with how can we? Because then implied in that is we know there's an answer, and we may not know, we have any idea how we're going to do it, but we're going to start asking, and that's where we'll apply our resources. Is how are we going to tackle this? Where can we start? Who can we lean on? Let's get creative. Best idea wins. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be the right department coming up with the idea. We may need to get innovative and cross collaborate.
Mm-hmm. And all of that, you can't do it unless you have that mindfulness, unless you have that emotional awareness and being able to say, here is how I feel about this. I know that I can overcome this. I know that I have the resilience to do so, but I need to do this. And something else we had talked about was putting structure around what you've learned over time and actually being able to think about it in a different light rather than the I can't, but the how can I. And I know that you had mentioned the mindfulness based attention training that you had attended at UCSD, but we had touched on it briefly, and I'd love to talk about it some more right now if you're interested, just about the neurology between the intersection and recognizing like your elevated heart rate, the parasympathetic nerves, how all of that works, how to tell, here's how I'm feeling, here's how I can act, rather than saying, here's how I'm feeling, I'm going to shut down.
Yeah, it's huge. So we all have an autonomic system. We have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. We've probably heard in references like fight or flight. The parasympathetics referred to oftentimes as like rest and digest. The reason is because literally when we detect a threat, and so if you think about humans, right? Like the humans who were best able to detect a threat lived and had offspring. We have cultivated this ability to detect threats over many, many, many generations. And there's really not a lot of high stakes in our lack of ability to detect positive things. Just, if you notice a positive thing, cool, but it didn't really save your life, versus if you fail to detect a threat, you might die. So we have finely tuned that. So negative things stick like Velcro, and positive things tend to run off like Teflon. So we have to be intentional, first of all, about noticing positive things. The book Hardwiring Happiness talks about that, where if you take 12 seconds and just kind of appreciate and focus on something positive, you can actually wire the neurology of your brain to take in that positive. But the negative, back to that, we can detect a threat because of somebody's criticism, or we think somebody's undermining us, or they looked at us wrong, or it's not a tiger in the bushes necessarily, it's somebody across the table who rubbed us wrong or looked at us wrong. We can think we detect a threat, and that can trigger that fight or flight, and literally our blood flow changes. When your sympathetic nervous system is in the driver's seat because you've been triggered in that way, the blood flow gets redirected away from your brain and your stomach to your arms and legs so you can run or fight. Literally, that actually happens. Versus when your parasympathetic nervous system is online, the blood reroutes back to your digestive system and your brain, your higher level prefrontal cortex, where you make your logical decisions, and you have your executive function where you make good decisions, and you actually think versus just raw reaction in kind of a primal way. That's that rest and digest. And here's the really cool thing. you can teach yourself to understand when those triggers are happening. Like you get your elevated heart rate, you get tension in your neck, you get accelerated shallow breathing, for example, when you can kind of, everybody feels it a little differently, but you can, if you're paying attention, you can recognize that that's what's happening. And if you pause and take a few deep breaths where you just literally place your attention on your breathing, follow it all the way in, follow it all the way out, and slow down your breathing, it actually changes your physiology. You have a thing called a vagus nerve that gets stimulated, and it signals that it's okay to bring your parasympathetic nervous system back online. So I got a little nerdy there, but the bottom line is you can be intentional about recognizing when you're starting to feel that way and have a plan for that. So I'm about to speak to Will on Expert Talks. I feel a little bit of nervousness, right? I can take, it's funny, I don't even know if you know you did it, but you said take a deep breath. There's a reason. You take a deep breath, it allows your system to calm back down. You can get back to where you can actually think and step that way. So it's important to understand, it's called interoception, being able to understand that inner landscape, what's happening, what are you thinking, what story are you telling yourself, what emotions are you feeling, and what's going to be your response. So it's just that awareness creates a space between stimulus and response so that you can have some intentionality to the way that you choose to respond versus just reacting. We don't usually put our best selves forward when we're just reacting.
That makes tons of sense. And you know, something that's crazy, Monica, is the take a deep breath thing. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had a behavioral health whole section, and we had this annual training we had to do called You Map It. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but basically it's unit training for substance abuse, for any kind of depression, whatever it may be, suicidal ideations, really anything that goes with behavioral health. And one of the key things that they told us when we were instructing or when we were becoming instructors was make sure that you master this breathing technique. It's the 4 for 4, where you take a deep breath for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you release for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds. You do that 4 times. And I didn't understand what the purpose was. I knew that it made me feel okay once I had done it, but I had no idea that there was actual science behind it. I thought that there was something that happens where your body just says, oh, we'll let it go now that we've taken a deep breath. But no, it turns out that there's actually things that happen in your brain and chemical reactions that take place that truly make you more calm.
Exactly. And it's also called box breathing is another way. But that, excuse me, that's if your exhale is longer than your inhale, your heart rate will actually slow. Just a little tidbit. But anyway, back to MPEAK, just since you asked about it, I forgot to speak to that. What they did is at UCSD School of Medicine, they have a Center for Mindfulness, and they took the program out of the University of Massachusetts called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which has also been modified for MBAT, which is Mindfulness-Based Attention Training with the military. But what UCSD did is they took that program that is really in all the major hospitals around the country now. It's been, for the last 30 years. But they took that it's really aimed at helping anyone with chronic depression or pain or anxiety or PTSD, and their sports psychologists and their neuroscientists worked with the BMX Olympic team, and they said, how can we apply this to performers? You don't need to be in a place where something's necessarily wrong to use these skills to take your game to a new level. And so they cultivated this plan, they did a study, and they built an intervention to help elite performers perform at a higher level more consistently. You hear about like getting into flow state or being in the zone. Phil Jackson did this with the Bulls. He brought in George Mumford. They used these techniques. He took it to the Lakers. It was taken to the Golden State Warriors. You can see the track record there. It works. And the reason it works, I won't bore you with all the details, but what they did is they took like elite, like Navy SEALs, and they took elite performers that respond well under stress, and they put them in what's called an fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging or whatever. And they looked at what was happening in their brain while they did things like stress them out. So they'd have them do like a cognitive task while restricting their breathing. So you're already in, a tube, which is already a little panic inducing. And then they would have them be breathing through a tube. And then they would have them do a cognitive task while they would turn their airflow down by half. And what they saw is that the physiology of a brain of somebody like a Navy SEAL responds very differently than an average Joe. And then they took the average Joes and they took them through the mindfulness intervention, and they taught them how to do attention training and work on these mental skills. And their physiology changed after just an 8-week intervention to be just like the elite performer's brain when they were under that same duress and having to perform. Has your default mode network in your brain and your insula and your cortex. Anyway, I won't go into all of that. The point is, if you can place your attention where you want it to be, science says that your brain is wandering about 47% of the time. So like here in this talk, at least half the time, our brains are not even paying attention to what's happening here. But the more you can place your attention and then notice when it wanders and bring it back intentionally, it's like repetitions in the gym for your muscles. You're literally rewiring your neurology to be more capable of focus, more capable of resilience, both pre-stress, during stress, and post-stress recovery. Pretty important for performance.
And not just for physical performance either. That sounds like something that if you're maybe on a sales team or if maybe you're in operations, if you can do that, just imagine the benefits that you have. And Monica, I'm just curious, and you don't have to answer this if you're not comfortable, but is this something that you put the Go Health team through where maybe not the 8-week training, but do you tell them like, hey, you need to be mindful and here's how you do it and kind of guide them along that path?
Yes, several of the folks at Go Health have actually gone through the training. The reason I went there was because I was curious, but I ended up getting trained to teach it. And so I've class a few times and some of them have participated, but by and large, it's the day-to-day application of the little things like, what did you notice when that happened? Because, direct reports in your one-on-ones or team meetings, or as you're all kind of going through it together, stuff comes up and they'll say, "Wow, did you believe what that person did?" Or "I don't know how to solve this problem," or "This is going on." And as a mindfulness person who's aware of it and trying to help coach these, I won't give them the answer or tell them necessarily. I'll just say, so how did you work with that? So what did you notice? What did you think you should do next? And just because here's the thing, people know the answers most of the time. And we can get in this lazy habit of not thinking for ourselves and wanting someone else to think for us. And that's not helpful. So it might not be comfortable all the time, but I'm not going to just give them the answer most of the time. I'm not going to just solve the problem for them. I'm going to ask them to articulate the problem. I'm going to ask them what they think they ought to do next. I'm going to ask them, how did that work? Are you happy with the outcome? What do you think you could have done differently? And that usually they discover the answers for themselves and buy into it more than if I was just to tell them.
Mm-hmm. And that helps with their growth as well, because if you can't overcome discomfort, or if you're not able to have those techniques or even know what you're doing, then you're just going to stagnate and you're going to say, I hit this wall. No one's giving me the answer. Woe is me. I'm in a bad place now. And then you're going to start to spiral. So being able to continue to be mindful, I feel that's just one of the most important traits that you can have.
Yeah, and there's a few things. There's not much that's going to make me mad about anything. Direct feedback. You can say it the wrong way and go, well, shoot, I need to try again or whatever. Like you can make mistakes, but what's not acceptable in my book is to just run into some resistance and quit, is to need help and not ask for it, to see a threat and not say something, to have feedback and not deliver it directly, to, I could go on, but the point is, nobody grows or develops or accomplishes anything worthwhile by just saying what they think someone wants to hear, by just, rolling over. Now you do it with the person's dignity intact. You do it out of an invested relationship. You've got to have, human beings don't perform optimally in an environment where the negativity to positivity ratio is off. It should be 3 to 5 positive interactions to 1 negative. But to think it's all rosy all the time is just silly.
Yeah. And everything that you just said, Monica, there's one word I could think of the entire time that explained all of it. Can you guess what the word is? It was confidence. Confidence was the word. Everything you just said, you were just describing. This is how you become, or if you're confident in this, if you're able to say, okay, I'm under this stress and I can do this, it all ties back to that. And that ties back the confidence and the emotion and being aware of it. That's how you're going to drive that action. That's how you're going to drive that impact. And my next question for you is, I know that, like I was saying earlier, that amazing feat that you did of mobilizing an entire company and switching people to a remote status, the logistics, the communication, every piece of it that was managed. That's not something you could just say, oh, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to tell the engineers you can go remote. They're fine. They can just keep going to the office. You can't do that. You can't afford to do that. You can't afford not to have that confidence. But what was something that you did, if I can ask you this, what is something for your mindset that you did that you put yourself to say, I can do this? I know that you had a vision for it, but how do you execute a vision that maybe you haven't seen that outcome?
Yeah, I mean, none of us had ever done this before. It ended up needing to be a massive team effort. I mean, our engineers worked night and day without sleep for like 4 days in a row. I was thinking about this question because I knew you were going to ask me. And all things being equal, and when I say that, I mean like the logistics, the procurement of licenses and hardware, which was its own thing. And we couldn't just give somebody a laptop and send them home because we're dealing with people's personal information and their personal health information. And it all has to be, that machine that they walk home with can't be where the computing and the data storage happens. It all has to happen in a secure location. And so it's really a remote workstation you're setting up with a machine that's just an image of what's happening elsewhere, because all of the cybersecurity had to be there. It was fairly complex. Everyone was under a lot of pressure. We had a ticking time clock. We knew Pritzker in Illinois was going to issue a shelter-in-place order, and we just had a ticking time bomb. Basically, we had to get this done. And as it turns out, we got in under the wire by about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And so this is a plan we had mapped out. We were planning to go remote this year with some trials, and we had mapped it out with our technical teams, and they said the fastest we can do it is end of Q3. So like 8 months. Well, it turns out we did it in about 4 days. So here's the thing I know. No matter what, no matter who we're talking to, ourselves included, whatever our capabilities, whatever we assess our capabilities to be, we're wrong. We're underestimating it. We're capable of so much more than we realize. And sometimes it's just a matter of, it's just got to get done. And so I'm not going to pause to ask myself, can I do this? I'm just going to assume I can, and I'm going to throw myself at it. And maybe this is just years of habit, but I just have this naive belief that whatever it is, I can figure it out. And whatever it is, I can do it. And that might sound wrong, but what's the alternative? Like, I'd rather have that mentality and throw myself at something and fail than just never try. Mm-hmm. And mind you, I did not do this transition. I was charged with leading us through it, but it took hundreds of people to execute this. And so back to what I was saying, all things being equal, all the logistics, all the things that had to happen, those things like had to get figured out. But I think that the mindset, which is maybe what you're after, that I was able to bring to it was one of confidence in that I believed in us. I knew we'd figure it out. And I stayed calm. But there was also a sense of urgency. So it was just clean, crisp, clear to the best of our abilities. And when I didn't know, I just said, I don't know, let's figure out this problem together. And so again, being able to state the problem, just state the obvious with confidence that whatever it is, we'll figure it out. And so that ability to have clarity of thought, calm demeanor, I think goes back to the mindfulness training. And can you start your day, even though you open your eyes and wake up and get overwhelmed with a little bit of fear at just the stakes? Can you go, okay, how do I want today to look? What's that for weeks, every morning at 8 a.m. leading up to and past the transition, 50 people are on a screen looking at me going, what's the deal? I'm like, what? That's intimidating. That's intimidating. So you got to be able to feel the fear, acknowledge, and go, okay, what's my response? And so I think that's what it comes down to.
That is fantastic. And everything you were just saying, that it kind of brought me back to being in the Marine Corps. I don't know why, but I just had this vision of being in Okinawa, and what you were saying was tying in with stuff that had happened when I was there. And it's crazy because that mindset and having the confidence and being able to say, here's how we're going to do this, and saying, we're going to get the outcome. We have to figure it out. It's not failure is not an option in this sense as far as like that big picture goes, but how are we going to do this as a team and how are we going to move forward? That's something that I feel like veterans really kind of inherently gain while they're in the military.
And honestly, being like, I'll frame stuff like, it's funny, there's an old book by Dale Carnegie called Stop Worrying and Start Living. And I read it a long time ago, but the one thing I took from it was like, ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then work back from that, and framing it like that, like there's no chance somebody's going to shoot, or very remote chance that anybody's going to shoot at me today. Like, I'm safe. It could be so much worse. Like, it's like putting it into perspective. Like, the bottom line is probably not going to die. Like, if we fail, what's really going to happen? Well, fill it in. I'm probably not going to die. There would be implications. They would be bad, but the world would not end. We would find a way forward. And so just kind of recognizing what's the worst that could happen. That's probably not very likely. Now let me back it up and go, what is likely and what can I do about it? And by the way, the risks of inaction are probably far greater, because not acting is a choice, and that does bear consequences. So it's just kind of like working back and going, okay, I got this.
Mm-hmm. And that,
I can't tell you how often I say that, not just to myself, but like, people will come to me with a problem or they're freaked out, and I'll just go, you know what? I have confidence that you'll figure it out. You've got this. And that's all they need to hear. They'll figure it out.
yeah. And that's it, taking that first step, taking that first action. And, if you're operating in a new area, whether it be, transitioning from the military or transitioning to work from home for, thousands of people, overcoming that fear initially is the first step you have to do, and executing, making that actual movement, going from that planning stage and the here's what we're going to do to actually going boots on the ground and doing it. And I think that's something that most veterans are able to do, is take that action and take that first step. But Monica, a question that I have for you is, how, if someone doesn't, let's say it's somebody who maybe they've never been put in a situation, or they've gone the entire life just clean slate, never had to worry about taking action. How would you guide somebody to execute a vision or to take that first step?
Probably in a couple of ways. One, it might seem like a simple exercise, but if you just kind of actually take it seriously and get alone with yourself and go, where am I? No, really, down. Where do I want to go? Anything you can come up with. You can list where I don't want to go. Where, if you have to start there, where do I want to go? Start somewhere, write it down, and then say, what do I need to become? What do I need to get? What do I need to learn? Who can help me? And why would I even do it? Like, again, identifying separately the why, and really that part needs to be emotional. Here's the funny thing that I learned in sales: the decision-making part of your brain doesn't even have a language center. It functions off of emotion. Emotion's valuable, so it's also powerful. So mastering it versus being mastered by it is a big deal. But honestly, there's no better cure than just move, go, do something. I put it back to running. Like, I'm not a natural runner, but I've run a couple of ultra marathons, and I got into it. My sister dragged me into it, but there are so many times, and this is where I think that the military personnel get this. You don't feel like it, but you do it anyway. And so you get up and you go, and by 3-4 miles in, I think the mistake you make is the first 3 miles feel like crap. And you assume that the rest of it's going to feel even worse. If the first 3 feel like this, then what's mile 8 feel like? But the reality is, no, mile 4, it starts to get a little bit better. And when it starts to get really awful, it's hot or you're tired or whatever, and you recognize I'm starting to like mentally get off track and complain and get out of my rhythm, oh, I can get all the CO2 out of my lungs and take another deep breath and recenter myself and get back in the groove. And I can go for several more miles. You know, there's nothing quite like just making the decision to do it anyway. And then the more you do that, the more you develop that resilience and that discipline. It's nothing fancy. It's just it's the thousands of decisions you make day in and day out. And back to confidence, just really quickly, there's a lot of ways confidence looks, but the bottom line is if you set your internal core, all those micro expressions will flow out from that. That's why setting your mentality first of the way you ask questions, the assumptions you make, the meaning you make out of things. How are you explaining it? First of all, just start by paying attention. What's your thought life looking like? And is that a scary place to be in your head? What can you do about it? Just notice first. And usually just notice, you'll start to recognize what you could do differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that really does tie in with the brain in general and being able to push yourself to a limit of some sort. Because when you think about it, if you're doing, let's say you're doing an ultra marathon or you're training for it, exactly what you're saying. Once you hit that mental wall, your brain's going to say, I can't do this. You have to stop. I'm going to die. Help. Oh no. It's like, I just took 3 steps. Like I have not even started running yet. I just started stretching. And your brain has this fear because it is so worried that, oh no, my body is going to collapse. And then what can I do? So if you're able to overcome that fear and you're able to say, look, my body is actually extremely good at this and I'm going to do it. I don't care what you say, internal voice. I'm going to do this anyways. If you can take that control, that in itself is a type of confidence that, like you're saying, is going to exude out and people can see, oh, this person, like they're about it. They know what's happening. They know who they are. And they're able to take that internal emotion and that whole self and grow from it and build from it and move forward from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's back to the balanced effort. So we should explore our edges, right? And you don't explore your edges without falling down sometimes. And you just kind of need to get okay with that and come to a place of security that says, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to push my edge and fall down. I just learned something about myself. I just got stronger. There's also a balanced effort. Like I was, March of 2018, I was attempting a 100-mile race and I did something really stupid. So at mile 20, I can picture exactly where I was. I hurt myself. I hurt my knee. I felt it happen. I was like, oh, shoot. But I was hell or high water, not going to quit. So 40 more miles later, so I'm at mile 61, on an injured leg, my leg just gave out and I was out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night and like, there's not a convenient way to quit. And I hurt myself. So that was not smart. So there's a balance, right? Like there was a lot of resilience and training that led up to that point, but there's also an intelligence that says, okay, maybe live to fight another day. So anyway, just balanced effort. Are you slacking off and not pressing your edges and learning about yourself? Are you holding back? And also, are you, ignoring internal signals that you should be listening to and maybe being a little bit more intelligent about the way you're exerting yourself?
Yeah, no, I agreed wholeheartedly. I also had an injury based off of me not listening to myself where I was just squatting. I had just finished doing a couple of sets and I said, I'm going to work on my form. I decided, let's just go as low as I can go. I'm not very flexible. My hips don't move, but let's just go all the way down below parallel. And I went down. I did it. I was so happy. I came back up and I just felt pop, 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 pop. And I said, uh-oh, that's not good. Just took the weight off, racked it, and I fell down. And it turned out, oh, herniated 5 discs. Had I just not been silly and overconfident and listened to my body saying, you should probably stretch, just, work on some flexibility at some point in your life. If I had done that, life would be completely different. But that, again, that's just a story to kind of tie back into exactly what you're saying. You do need to listen to yourself. You do need to know where those edges are. Be okay with failure. Be okay with taking that step and saying, all right, here's how I learned from it. But you can't overdo. You can't say, okay, here's failure. Let's just keep driving into it. Let's see where this chaos leads. If you don't have a plan and if you don't have the ability to take that step back and look at it from the bigger picture.
Yeah. And none of us does this by ourselves. It's important
Mm-hmm.
to have good partners, good teammates, good bosses, good, someone in your life who you can just not worry about being able to be vulnerable with and just express what you're going through at the moment. And maybe they just need to listen. Maybe they don't need to solve anything for you. But it's important to find a coach, a friend, somebody who you can just like sound things out with, and who can, sometimes you need to lend other people your confidence, and sometimes you need to borrow somebody's confidence. So we all need that. And it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable like that.
Mm-hmm. And vulnerability is one of the key things of courage and of confidence. And that's something where, it ties into, and I apologize for keep talking about the Marine Corps, but
No,
they instilled a lot into me. The core values are honor, courage, and commitment. And having the honor to say, like, okay, we're here as a team where I'm going to do this the right way, keep my honor clean, having the courage to say, I messed up or I need help, and then being committed to the actual, we're going to get this done. We're going to do this as a team. I'm not in this alone. You're not in this alone. We're in this together. And then tying in everything that we've just talked about today, where, have that emotional resilience, be able to say, I'm going to do this. How can I do this? Not, I can't do this.
And all of those translate so beautifully into the corporate world, if that's where, if that's where you want to take those skills, in any team effort, really. Those core values are so applicable no matter what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. I think that may be the best thing about the military is just the fact that they are able to instill that at scale, where everyone at boot camp, the entire time you're there, you're just yelling about the core values. It's crazy that was like my vocabulary with those three words for months. But Monica, I really appreciate it. We're coming up towards the end of time here, and I want to make sure we have time to answer any questions that anyone has. But I'd also like to thank you for everything you've talked about. Make sure that if there's anything else that you want to cover today or that maybe we missed or you want to dive a little deeper on, we can cover that as well.
It's my pleasure. I'm so grateful to be here. So thank you for having me. Really grateful for the partnership that GoHealth has with Shift.
That's awesome. We have one from Shane that came in that reads, how can you build confidence in your inner voice?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, so there's, we'll do an exercise with MPEAK where you identify the critical coach and the compassionate coach. And I think we all kind of know those inner voices, and you can usually personify it pretty easily. We all have somebody, whether it's an old, I don't know, drill sergeant or like a coaching, a PE teacher, a teacher, somebody, a parent, who was that critical coach who maybe meant well, but was tearing you down. And that voice kind of resonates and maybe is the one we hear when we're trying something, especially something new, or we're worried about how do we measure up. And what we do is we identify it, we give it a face and a name and remember the voice. And then we say, thank you. I know you meant well. I know you were just trying to protect me. I've got it from here. And then working with how can we cultivate a compassionate inner coach voice that will help us use a what's called a positive explanatory style that just goes, hey, responds to failure with, it's not permanent, it's not pervasive, it doesn't apply to everything, it's just this one. What can I learn from it? I'll get the next one. And then views yourself as a growing, ever increasing capability being versus a fixed capability, right? And so understanding that everything you encounter, every challenge you face, every mistake you make just left you with more capability, more understanding, more wisdom, more experience. And so being aware of that, trusting that, embracing it. A sucky workout is still something that made you stronger. A difficult exchange where you can really just sit back and go, you know what? I'm not proud of how I did that. I'm going to go talk to that person and say, I'm not proud of how that went. Can we talk about it? That's huge. Take a risk like that. But cultivating confidence in your inner voice, I'd say, first of all, just pay attention. What are the stories you're telling yourself? How are you speaking to yourself? And here's the kind of the crux. Think of any youth, any child in your life who you care for, and then think about anyone speaking to them the way that you speak to yourself. Does it pass that test? If it doesn't, you should cut it out and find a new way to talk to yourself, because you're deteriorating your confidence, you're deteriorating your resilience and your capability when you do that to yourself. So picture that kid you love and picture anybody talking to them that way, and then go, oh, okay, if it's not good enough for them, it's not good enough for you.
Poor kid in my head. I did not know. That was a
Me
very
too.
good test. Yep. Poor kid. But that ties back in, Monica, to everything exactly like you're saying. And Shane, I do hope that answers your question. But I mean, being able to overcome those negative thoughts, and that's something I experienced. Monica, I was telling you about it the other day, where I had this whole toxicity field around me, where everything was just bad, and oh, I did this wrong. I'm going down this downward spiral. But I was able to do exactly what you're saying. I didn't imagine the kid, and I'm glad I didn't, because he would have cried. But something that I realized was, this is just a mindset. This is something that I can change. I control this. And the last thing I want to cover before we had time is, I remember you were saying, and we touched on it a little bit today, but being able to take something that you can control, and how do you go about doing that compared to something that's out of your control, and saying it's not something that I can, really make an impact on. But how do you say, okay, I'm in control of this situation? Or how do you even identify if something is something that you can control or something that you can't?
Yeah. So first of all, the questions you ask matter, right? The way you approach a situation, a problem matters. And so it's, what can I do? Who can help? What resources are available? All of those questions assume that there's something available. I just need to go find it. So then that brings control back. So wherever you go, there you are. You have incredible resources that you maybe have taken for granted. Like, our minds are incredible. Our capacity as human beings is really unmeasured at this point. It's far greater than we're aware of. There are, if you're looking for them, people and resources more than probably any other time in human history available to you. So what questions are you asking? Are you asking the questions that say, what can I do? Who can help? Because if you are, if you ask those questions, your brain will work on the problem, even if you don't know it. Your subconscious is working on it. And I delegate stuff to that all the time. I'll go, okay, let me make sure I understand what the problem is. Okay, I understand it. Okay, I've got to go do some other stuff. I'm going to just trust that that's cooking back there. My processors are working on it, and I'll come back to it, and I'll probably have some thoughts, and I'll just write a bad draft, just download. And it's amazing what comes out of that sometimes. It just, again, being okay with writing a bad draft, for example, to just start.
And you have to have that starting place so you can keep moving forward. And it is crazy how the mind works and just how the human body works. And, we are, in a sense, computers or machines, and you're able to fuel it with the foods that you eat and all of these different things. So, Monica, I do truly appreciate it. And I don't want that to be the last thing that is said during this, is that humans are machines. But if you could just, if you have any final thoughts, again, I truly appreciate you talking about these topics. And I found it very insightful. I think everyone here did as well.
Let's see. Thank you for having me. I guess I would just say, so grateful for the military, and all of the things that are learned, taught, the discipline. I admire it so much. I love the way it translates back into civilian life, and look for that influence. And just, I guess, would leave you with, you're capable of more than you know, and ask yourself, how can I? And go explore your edges.
Well, thank you, Monica. And this is something that I cannot wait to share with the entire ship community, so everyone can understand this, and, explore what's out there, explore your edges. And John, I see that you like that quote. Monica also had another one, and I will leave with this. But one of the quotes that she left us with, or that she had told me, was, if your why isn't greater than the resistance to discomfort, you aren't going anywhere. So just remember that, everybody. But Monica, thank you again so much. Do you have any other wonderful nuggets before we go? We've got about 30 seconds left. I want to make sure we maximize this.
Oh man. Well, thank you, Will. No, that's just it. Find your why. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. Keep asking. Keep pursuing. It's the little things day in, day out. Just keep taking action and keep asking yourself, what's up? Keep looking inward and looking around if we can help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Monica. And everyone, thank you for joining us today for Expert Talks. We appreciate your time. Be on the lookout for a survey from us to see what we could do better. But thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. And thanks for coming to Expert Talks.